Welcome back, my fellow Chibits, to part 2 of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Now, I want to continue back where I left off in the last part, getting back onto some of the characters and trying to get into the main purpose of this series. So, getting back on topic, Pride and Father, even though Father died, Pride lived on. And Pride was the sole survivor out of all the villains, to do a quick recap of part 1. And what was even shocking about this is that Pride looks very similar to Father. Almost identical in certain ways. And it's like the villain lived on. I like that. I like that a lot. And pride was one of the strongest emotions when it came to Father as a person. Because we found out by von Hohenheim, he said that pride was one of the biggest things when it came to Father's personality, his arrogance, his pride, and that was very easy to be showcased when it came towards the end of the series, because the very undoing of Father was his arrogance. His pride is what really took him down as a person. And now, let's get into the concepts of this series. I think I have dwelled onto the characters in the awesomeness of when it comes to how these characters have been fleshed out. I am going to get into the characters once again when it comes to certain moments, but let's get into the actual concept of the series, or the end game, what the main goal of this series was, and the foreshadowing and stuff like that, the story in general. So, the plot. What is the plot about? If this is your first time, or, you're wanting to just hear my thoughts on the plot, or, getting a brief summary of it, the main endgame of the series for our villain was to drag down God, fuse with God, and become the perfect being. That's what he wanted to do. That was the end game of our villain. Now, to be real here, it was nothing unique, so to say. Like, I have seen this concept a lot, how villains want to become God, or fuse with God, kill God. These concepts have been used a lot in anime, literature, movies, TV shows. It's been used a lot. But, did Fullmetal Alchemist use this concept right? That is what we need to think. Instead of thinking about how this concept is not original, we need to think about, did the way it was used, was it enough where it was unique and had its own spin on things? Personally, yes. I personally believe when it came to the end game and the way it was done was unique compared to so many countless other anime I've seen before this that have tried to do a similar thing with a villain trying to become God or take down God from the heavens. Like, when you saw the villain accomplish his end game, Father accomplished his endgame, or the Dwarf in the Flask, or Homunculus. He absorbs everybody. He makes a giant Philosopher's Stone using the entire nation. Millions, 50 million people he uses. And he becomes his giant existence and wants to drag down God itself from the sun and moon and drag it to Earth and gain its power. And in fact, the villain won. Maybe not permanently, but the villain won. And that in of itself, too, is very rare when it comes to manga and anime. I mean, there's some villains that win, but majority of the time, the villains always get stopped right before they accomplish that endgame. And we never get to see the effects of what happens if they did accomplish that endgame. And for a few moments, maybe 10 minutes, Homunculus was God. He gained the power of God. And the power he got was scary as fuck. Because when you see the world kind of come to an end, I mean the little area of the world come to an end, you think all hope is lost. And when you see that beginning scene when he became God, and Father's sitting in his chair like this, like a badass, and he puts his hand up, and you see this giant fireball, like this little tiny fireball pop up into his hand, you're looking at it, you're like, and he reveals that he made a mini sun. And he was holding back the heat of that mini sun. Then you knew he obtained his end goal, his end game. He became God. He made a fucking sun. That in of itself is scary. so scary. It is so scary because the power he had in his hands was unbelievable. Something you haven't seen in Brotherhood. Fullmetal Alchemist, you haven't seen that type of power at all. That was unheard of. And to see that type of power was unbelievable on a grand scale. And it's very ironic how he became so arrogant that he thought that no humans could best him. Like, throughout the entirety of the series, one of the most reoccurring themes to Brotherhood was that the homunculus thought they were better. They thought they were better. They thought they were stronger, more powerful than these frail, pathetic, and weak humans. That's what homunculus thought. Father and the 7 deadly sins. Gluttony, envy, lust, pride, wrath, all of them. And sloth. They all had their own look on humans, but usually it was negative, and they looked at humans as if they were weak, frail, stupid. They can't change. They can't grow. And that is the main concept of Brotherhood. Now, besides the obvious plot progression and how the ending was done, the main theme of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood was the path of self-sacrifice, giving up something for others and gaining the ability to grow as a person and learning from your mistakes. That is what I think the main theme, the underlying theme of Brotherhood is, because the main lesson you can pull out of the series, besides the epic storyline and tell from start to finish of episode 1 to 64, the main theme is Truth's main goal was to teach humanity, or humans in general, a lesson. How to have self-sacrifice, or learn to grow from your mistakes. And every time a human being tried to step into God's territory, they would get punished. They would lose the very thing because of their arrogance. And this goes back into what I was saying earlier. The main reason why homunculus fell, and what's very ironic about it, was because his own arrogance drug him down. He thought he wasn't human. He thought he was better than humanity. He thought he was better than anyone. But the very thing that drug him down and killed him at the very end was his own pride, his own arrogance, his own greed. Everything. When he sacrificed all his emotions, all these different 7 deadly sins, he in fact didn't really give them up. He thought he became a higher existence, a higher being, getting rid of all these different elements that make him human. He thought he could separate himself from being human, but in fact that was his very undoing. It was. And he became arrogant, slothful, greedy, lustful for power. Just everything he tried to cast aside doomed him. He was a very ignorant human being. Even though he's an homunculus, he is an ignorant human being that fell. He fell and died thanks to his pride. Ironic. Very ironic and symbolic the way he was taken out also by these frail and weak humans that he has constantly made fun of throughout the entire series, calling even bugs. I remember on episode 27, he was calling humans bugs. And these very people that he called bugs was his very undoing. So, very, very poetic irony, I have to say. I like that. I really, really like that. And that's just talking about Father's downfall, of wanting to drag down God. That's not even getting into the foreshadowing. So, the foreshadowing of that scene, that endgame, was foreshadowed in like the first 15 episodes. Yeah, the first 15 episodes foreshadowed that endgame, because we see like this dude trying to drag down God, the sun. We saw it on the ancient tablets, stone tablets in the desert. And that scene right there in the first 15 episodes was foreshadowing that ending. That's some really good writing. I like that. It clearly goes to show you that the writer knew what they wanted to write before the series was over. They knew, or already had a clear picture in their mind of how the series was going to end. And that in of itself is very, very, very beautiful and wanted. I love writers that know how they want to end their series when they start writing it. And that was what we got when it came to Brotherhood. This writer knew how it wanted to wrap up this entire series. So, I think I want to move into the next part. The next part I want to be discussing individually. I want to be talking about, I guess, different things, like other characters, different plot lines, like talking about the foreshadowing or the slow plot build-up, Philosopher's Stones and stuff like that. I want to be focusing the next part on that. So I want to end this video here. See you all in the next part of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Please be safe. Chibi out.